My name is Cassandra Miller and I am 32 years old. I will never forget the moment my mother stood up at our family reunion, raised her glass in front of 50 relatives, pointed at my sister, Amy, and announced, "This is the daughter who has always loved us. The other one, she has never lifted a finger." 9 years of silently paying their mortgage and bills flashed before my eyes. I simply smiled, grabbed my purse, and walked out. Before I continue my story, I would love to know where you are watching from. Please hit like and subscribe if you have ever had a family member undervalue your contributions. The next morning, I had 22 missed calls. Growing up in suburban Ohio, I learned early that my place in our family was different from my sister Amy, who was 4 years younger. Our parents never tried to hide their preference. Amy was the planned child, the perfect little girl with bouncy curls and a charming smile who could do no wrong. I was the responsible one. The accident they never quite warmed up to. "Cassandra, why cannot you be more like your sister?" became the soundtrack of my childhood. While Amy received praise for participation ribbons, my academic achievements were acknowledged with brief nods and quick changes of subject. When I made valedictorian, my mother commented that I should have spent more time developing social skills instead of hiding in books. This dynamic shaped me in ways I am still uncovering in therapy. I became fiercely independent, determined to prove my worth through achievement. Every A, every award, every accomplishment was driven by a desperate need for the approval that never came. I poured myself into academics, graduating at the top of my class and earning a full scholarship to Columbia University in New York. Moving to New York was both escape and opportunity. For the first time, I could breathe without the constant comparison to Amy. I thrived in my finance program, landing prestigious internships that led to a junior analyst position at a respected firm. Meanwhile, Amy dropped out of community college after 3 semesters, to find herself with our parents funding her series of abandoned passions and extended trips abroad. Then came 2008. The financial crisis hit many families hard, including mine. Dad lost his management position when his company downsized, and at 54 found himself struggling to find comparable work. Mom had always worked part-time at a local boutique, but it was not enough to cover their expenses. Their savings dwindled rapidly as they maintained the lifestyle they had always known, too proud to downsize or admit financial difficulty. I learned about their situation by accident during a rare visit home. Finding a foreclosure notice poorly hidden beneath a magazine on the kitchen counter sent me into problem-solving mode. Despite the years of emotional neglect, they were still my parents. That night, I set up an automatic monthly transfer from my account to theirs, enough to cover their mortgage and essential bills. "This is just a business investment in the family home," I told myself, creating a fiction that protected my heart from acknowledging the deeper truth. I was still seeking their approval, their love. I never told them about the transfers, knowing their pride would prevent them from accepting help, especially from me. Instead, I let them believe they were managing through careful budgeting. For 9 years, I supported them financially, watching from a distance as they praised Amy for sending occasional care packages or calling more frequently than I did. Amy, meanwhile, bounced between jobs and relationships, occasionally moving back home between adventures. She never contributed financially, but was celebrated for emotional support and physical presence that I could not provide while building my career in New York. My therapist, Dr. Hansen, helped me see the unhealthy patterns in our family. "You are trying to buy the love that should have been freely given," she pointed out during our 3rd session. "Financial support cannot fill the emotional void." She was right, but breaking free from the pattern proved difficult. Every time I considered stopping the payments, guilt overwhelmed me. What kind of daughter would let her parents lose their home? What would the extended family think? And somewhere in a corner of my heart, I rarely acknowledged hope. Persisted that someday they would recognize my sacrifice and finally see me. Despite the emotional drain of my family's situation, I built a fulfilling life in New York. I advanced to senior financial analyst, bought a comfortable condo in a neighborhood I loved, and cultivated genuine friendships with people who valued me for exactly who I was. I dated occasionally, though. My trust issues and workaholic tendencies made sustaining relationships challenging. My chosen family of friends became my support system, the people who celebrated my victories and comforted me through setbacks without conditions or comparisons. The annual Miller family reunion had been a tradition since before I was born. Held every summer at my parents' property, it brought together extended family from across the country for a weekend of forced connection and thinly veiled competitions over whose children were more successful. I had skipped the previous 2 years, citing work commitments that were only partial excuses. This year, Dr. Hansen encouraged me to attend with clear boundaries. Avoidance reinforces the power these dynamics have over you, she explained during our session the week before the reunion. Engagement with healthy limits is the path to genuine freedom. Still, I might have declined if Amy had not called. Mom will be devastated if you miss another year, she said, her voice heavy with the familiar blend of guilt and judgment. Is your fancy job really more important than family? The irony of Amy, who had never held a job longer than 8 months, criticizing my work ethic was not lost on me. But I agreed to come scheduling the Friday off work to drive to Ohio, booking a hotel room, rather than staying at the family home and preparing mentally for what would inevitably be an emotionally draining weekend. I spent an absurd amount of time choosing my outfit, finally settling on a blue summer dress that projected both success and approachability. My armor would be subtle perfection, giving them nothing obvious to criticize. I had my hair professionally blown out, applied natural-looking makeup, and wore the pearl earrings my grandmother had left me, the only family member who had ever seemed to truly see me. The 5-hour drive from New York to the small town where I grew up gave me too much time to rehearse conversations and prepare responses to the predictable inquiries about my love life and when I planned to have children. I practiced breathing techniques Dr. Hansen had taught me, reminding myself that I was no longer the desperate for approval child I had once been. I was a successful adult visiting out of choice, not obligation. When I arrived at the familiar property, the knot in my stomach tightened. Cars already lined the long driveway. Relatives I barely remembered setting up tables and hanging decorations in the large backyard. I parked behind a minivan with Florida plates likely belonging to my father's sister and her family. Aunt Debbie spotted me first, rushing over with genuine warmth that momentarily eased my anxiety. Cassandra, you made it this year. Your mom did not think you would come. Work has been busy, I offered the standard excuse that was partially true, but I wanted to see everyone. The lie tasted bitter but necessary. I wanted to see some of them, the few relatives who had shown me kindness over the years. The rest, including my immediate family, I was enduring for the sake of my own healing process. Inside the house, I found my mother directing the food preparation with military precision. She barely looked up when I entered the kitchen, acknowledging me with a distracted, "You are late. The potato salad needs to be stirred." "No, hello. No, thank you for coming." Just an immediate task assignment that reminded me of my place in the hierarchy. "Nice to see you too, Mom," I said, forcing brightness into my voice as I set down the expensive wine I had brought and moved to the refrigerator to find the potato salad. My father entered, giving me an awkward side hug before immediately asking if I had seen the new grill he had bought. The unspoken message was clear: do not create tension with your mother. Keep things surface level. I nodded and expressed appropriate interest in the grill, which I later realized had been purchased with money I had indirectly provided. Amy arrived an hour later to effusive greetings and exclamations over her new highlights. "Sorry I could not help with setup," she announced to general dismissal of her apology. "The traffic from Cincinnati was awful." "You are here now, sweetheart. That is all that matters," our mother said, embracing her warmly. The contrast to my reception was stark but familiar. Throughout the afternoon, I helped set up tables, arranged flowers, and prepared food alongside aunts and female cousins. I overheard my mother telling Aunt Debbie how Amy had been such a rock for them during the difficult financial period after Dad lost his job. "She calls every day to check on us. Cassandra is too busy with her important career to remember she has family." The familiar pain of this mischaracterization surfaced, but I pushed it down. I knew the truth, even if no one else did. The monthly transfers from my account were the invisible foundation that had kept their lives stable for 9 years. Yet Amy, who had contributed nothing financially but called regularly to complain about her own problems, was the dedicated daughter. Not everyone bought into the narrative. My cousin Stephanie, who had always seen through the family dynamics, rolled her eyes at me after overhearing my mother. "Aunt Linda has always had a selective memory," she whispered. "Remember when she claimed Amy made the quilt that you spent an entire summer on?" That small moment of validation from Stephanie was like oxygen. There were people who saw the truth even if they were not the ones whose recognition I had spent a lifetime seeking. By evening, the backyard had been transformed with string lights, tablecloths, and centerpieces. Relatives continued to arrive, greeting each other with varying degrees of genuine enthusiasm. I moved through the space like a ghost present, but somehow separate, observing the family rituals with new clarity. The way certain relatives were fawned over while others were subtly dismissed. The constant comparisons between cousins. The unspoken competition that turned even compliments into weapons. In therapy, I had begun to understand that these dynamics were not unique to my relationship with my parents. They permeated the entire extended family system, with clear favorites and scapegoats established across generations. Recognizing the pattern did not erase the pain, but it helped me see that the problem had never been me. I was simply assigned a role in a dysfunctional system long before I had the power to reject it. By Saturday evening, the reunion was in full swing. 52 relatives ranging from infants to my great-uncle Walter, who had just celebrated his 89th birthday, gathered in the backyard. String lights twinkled overhead, creating a warm glow that belied the undercurrents of tension and competition flowing beneath the surface pleasantries. The long tables were covered in blue checkered cloths, laden with potluck dishes, representing family recipes and regional specialties from wherever relatives now lived. 3 generations mingled, catching up on life events, sharing photos of children and grandchildren, comparing career advancements and home renovations in ways that pretended to be casual while clearly establishing hierarchy. I navigated the social landscape carefully, genuinely enjoying conversations with certain relatives, while strategically avoiding others. My cousin Mark and I discussed his new architecture firm. Aunt Jessie updated me on her recovery from knee surgery. I held my newest second cousin baby Emma, giving my cousin Rachel a brief break from motherhood. Throughout it all, I maintained a pleasant demeanor while keeping an emotional distance that protected me from the deeper currents of family dynamics. I answered questions about my career with modest confidence, deflected inquiries about my love life with humor, and avoided any topics that might trigger my mother's disapproval. Amy, meanwhile, worked the crowd like a politician, moving from group to group with animated stories and affectionate touches. She had always been naturally charismatic, drawing people to her with an effortless warmth I had never mastered. I did not begrudge her this gift, but watched with a mixture of admiration and pain as our parents beamed at her performance. Amy just got a promotion at the boutique. My mother announced to anyone who would listen, though I knew from our limited conversations that it was hardly a promotion, just a minor title change, with no increase in responsibility or compensation. She has such a natural eye for fashion. When Amy mentioned considering taking classes at the community college again, our father nodded approvingly. "It is never too late to find your path," he said, patting her shoulder. I thought about how they had reacted to my MBA application years earlier, questioning whether it was really necessary, and suggesting I was becoming overqualified and intimidating to men. As dinner wound down and dessert was being served, the traditional family toasts began. Uncle Robert raised a glass to absent family members. Cousin Jennifer announced her pregnancy to enthusiastic congratulations. Great Uncle Walter, as the eldest present, offered a rambling remembrance of reunions past. Then my father stood somewhat uncomfortably, as public speaking had never been his strength. "Linda and I want to thank everyone for coming," he said, looking around the gathering. "Family is what gets you through the tough times. We are blessed to have all of you in our lives." It was a generic speech, carefully avoiding any specific mentions that might imply preference or neglect. My father had always been a master of pleasant neutrality, a skill that had enabled him to avoid confronting the favoritism that defined our family dynamic. When he sat down, my mother rose. She had always enjoyed being the center of attention, and she surveyed the assembled relatives with the satisfaction of a queen addressing her subjects. At 58, she remained an attractive woman who worked hard to maintain her appearance. Her highlighted hair perfectly styled her summer dress, carefully chosen to flatter. "I want to propose a toast to my daughters," she began, and something in her tone immediately set off warning signals. I straightened in my seat, instinctively preparing for what was coming. "Motherhood has been the greatest blessing of my life," she continued, her voice carrying across the now quiet gathering. "Watching my girls grow into women has filled me with such pride." She turned toward Amy, her expression softening with genuine affection. "Amy, you have been our constant joy, our faithful daughter who has stood by us through every challenge." Amy beamed, soaking in the praise like a flower turning toward sunlight. I maintained my pleasant expression, having long ago perfected the art of masking pain in public. "This is the daughter who has always loved us," my mother declared, raising her glass higher toward Amy. Then she turned slightly her gaze, finding me with a coolness that still had the power to wound. "The other one, she has never lifted a finger for this family." The words hung in the air like physical objects. 50 pairs of eyes turned toward me, expressions ranging from embarrassment to curiosity to discomfort. The background noise of children playing at the far end of the yard suddenly seemed unnaturally loud, in contrast to the silence that had fallen over the adult gathering. 9 years. 9 years of monthly transfers that had kept their home from foreclosure. 9 years of paying utility bills, property taxes, insurance premiums. 9 years of enabling them to maintain their lifestyle and pride, while receiving nothing but criticism and comparison in return. For a moment, I considered standing up and listing every payment, every sacrifice, every time I had chosen their needs over my own desires. I imagined the shock on their faces, the uncomfortable realization dawning on the extended family that the narrative they had accepted was built on lies. But in that moment of public humiliation, I found unexpected clarity. No revelation, no evidence, no dramatic confrontation would change the fundamental truth my mother had never seen me and she never would. No amount of financial support or achievement would transform me from the other one into a daughter worthy of the love she gave Amy so freely. I met my mother's gaze directly, allowing myself one small moment of silent communication in which I let her see that I knew exactly what I had done for them and exactly who she was for denying it. Then I smiled, picked up my purse from beneath my chair, and stood. "Thank you for a lovely evening," I said to the table at large, my voice steady despite the earthquake of emotions beneath my calm surface. I nodded to the relatives I genuinely cared about, turned and walked away from the gathering with measured steps that declared this was a choice, not an escape. Behind me, conversation slowly, awkwardly resumed. I heard my father's voice calling my name once hesitantly, but no footsteps followed. No one came after me. Not my father, not Amy, not even a concerned aunt or cousin. Their silence confirmed what I had always known, but never fully accepted until that moment I was outside the circle, and perhaps I always had been. I got into my car, hands shaking slightly as I started the engine. As I drove down the long driveway away from my childhood home, strings of light growing smaller in my rearview mirror, I felt something unexpected beneath the pain and anger relief. The charade was over. The truth was in the open, even if they would never acknowledge it. For the first time in my adult life, I was free of the hope that had kept me tethered to people who could not love me as I deserved. The 20-minute drive to my hotel passed in a blur of streetlights and automatic turns remembered from childhood. Inside my room, I kicked off my shoes and sat on the edge of the bed, finally allowing the trembling that had been building since my mother's toast to overtake my body. I was not crying, not exactly, but experiencing waves of emotion too complex for simple tears. Anger came first, hot and clarifying. How dare she? After everything I had sacrificed, how dare she stand in front of our entire extended family and erase my contributions, the mortgage payments, the property taxes, the utility bills, the car insurance, the home repairs, the medical... Expenses not covered by insurance, all of it silently provided month after month, year after year, without acknowledgement or gratitude. Beneath the anger lay a deeper, more painful emotion: grief. Not just for tonight's humiliation, but for the lifetime of seeking approval from people constitutionally incapable of giving it. For the little girl who had tried so hard to earn love that should have been freely given. For the young woman who had tied herself in knots trying to prove her worth. For all the energy and resources I had poured into a black hole of parental approval that would never be filled. My phone buzzed repeatedly in my purse notifications and calls coming in rapid succession as the family processed what had happened. I turned it off without looking at the screen. Whatever drama was unfolding back at the reunion, I would not be part of it tonight. For once, I would prioritize my own emotional well-being over family expectations. I ran a hot bath, pouring in the lavender bath salts I had packed. As I soaked in the steaming water, I began the process of mentally untangling myself from the web of obligation and guilt that had defined my relationship with my parents. The monthly transfers that had seemed like filial duty now revealed themselves as payments for approval that never came. Financial support had become my substitute for the emotional connection I craved, but could not create through direct engagement. Dr. Hansen had been trying to help me see this for months. Your financial support enables the dysfunction, she had said during our last session. It maintains the illusion that their lifestyle choices are sustainable without any need for them to change or grow. She was right. By silently covering their expenses, I had not only enabled their financial irresponsibility but also their emotional stagnation. They had never had to face the consequences of their choices, or examine the dynamics that had driven their eldest daughter to maintain her distance, while simultaneously funding their lifestyle. That night in the hotel room, I made a decision. The transfers would stop. 9 years was enough. They were both still young enough to work to downsize, to make the adjustments they had avoided through my silent subsidy. It would not be cruelty but clarity, not punishment but a necessary step toward healthier relationships for all of us. I slept surprisingly well, the decision bringing a peace I had not expected. In the morning, I ordered room service breakfast and finally turned my phone back on, bracing myself for the fallout. 22 missed calls, 37 text messages, 5 voicemails, the digital evidence of a family in chaos. I started with the text messages, scanning quickly through variations of "Are you okay?" and "What happened?" from cousins and aunts. Amy had sent 7 increasingly angry messages beginning with, "How could you embarrass Mom like that?" and escalating to, "You always have to make everything about you." My father had sent a single text, "Please call when you can." The voicemails revealed more. My father, uncomfortable but apologetic: "Cassandra, your mother did not mean it the way it sounded. Please come back so we can talk about this as a family." Amy, indignant and defensive: "I cannot believe you would walk out during Mom's toast. Do you know how upset she is? You always do this. You always put your feelings above everyone else's. Call me back." Aunt Debbie, my father's sister, sounded genuinely concerned: "Honey, I do not know what is going on, but that was not right. Call me if you need to talk. I am here for you." The most illuminating message came from my mother's sister, Aunt Patricia, who had always maintained a polite distance from family drama. "Cassandra, things got very strange after you left. Your cousin Stephanie mentioned something about you helping your parents financially during the recession. Is that true? Because your mother has always told everyone that Amy has been supporting them. Call me back, please. I think there is more to this story than any of us knew." The final voicemail was from Stephanie herself. "Cass, I am so sorry about what happened. After you left, I kind of lost it, and told everyone about seeing the bank statements that one time I stayed with you in New York. I hope that was okay. People should know the truth. Call me. The family is having some very interesting conversations right now." I remembered the weekend Stephanie had stayed with me 2 years earlier. I had been reviewing my financial records for tax purposes, including the 9 years of transfers to my parents. Stephanie had seen the statements on my desk and asked about them, and in a rare moment of transparency, I had explained the situation. She had kept my confidence until now. As I processed these messages, my phone rang again. It was Aunt Patricia. I hesitated, then answered. Cassandra, thank goodness. Are you all right? I am fine, Aunt Patricia, I said, surprised by the genuine concern in her voice. We had never been particularly close. I do not know how to ask this delicately, so I will just ask. Have you been financially supporting your parents since Michael lost his job? The directness of the question caught me off guard. For 9 years, I had maintained the fiction that my parents were managing on their own. The habit of protection was strong. Why do you ask? I deflected. Because after you left last night, all hell broke loose, she said bluntly. Stephanie told everyone she had seen proof that you had been paying your parents' mortgage for years. Your mother denied it, but then your father admitted it was true. Amy seemed genuinely shocked, which makes me think she did not know either, or she has been lying too. I cannot tell anymore. The image of this confrontation happening without me was surreal. After years of silent support, the truth had erupted in my absence. It is true, I finally acknowledged. I have been helping them since 2008. Monthly transfers to cover the mortgage and bills. 9 years, Aunt Patricia breathed. All while Linda has been telling everyone that Amy was the one helping them make ends meet. That you were too selfish and career-focused to care about their struggles. The confirmation of what I had suspected but never directly heard sent a wave of nausea through me. Not only had my mother failed to acknowledge my support, she had actively credited Amy for it. Did Amy know? I asked the question that had been forming since I listened to the voicemails. She claims she did not, Aunt Patricia said, skepticism evident in her tone. Says she thought the money was coming from her occasional contributions. But Cassandra, she would visit them regularly. She must have known their lifestyle did not match their income. We spoke for nearly an hour, Aunt Patricia filling in the details of what had happened after I left. The family reunion had devolved into factions, with some defending my mother, others demanding explanations, and many simply uncomfortable with the public airing of family secrets. By the time we finished talking, I had a clearer picture of the family dynamics that had been hidden beneath the surface for years. My mother had not only dismissed my contributions, but had actively constructed a narrative in which Amy was the supportive daughter and I was the cold, distant one who had abandoned them for my career. My father had known the truth but chosen the path of least resistance, allowing the fiction to persist rather than confronting his wife. And Amy, whether willfully ignorant or actively complicit, had accepted credit for support she had never provided. As I packed my suitcase to check out of the hotel, my phone rang again. This time it was my father. We need to talk, he said without preamble. All of us. Can you come to the house? I considered refusing, returning directly to New York and leaving them to deal with the consequences of years of deception. But something in his voice, a note of genuine remorse, perhaps made me reconsider. I will meet you, but not at the house, I said firmly. The diner on Main Street. 1 hour. It was time for a conversation that was long overdue. Garrison's Diner had been a fixture in our small town since the 1950s, its red vinyl booths and black and white checkered floor unchanged by decades of economic ups and downs. I arrived early, deliberately choosing a booth in the back corner that would afford some privacy while still being in a public place where emotional outbursts would be constrained. I ordered coffee and waited a manila envelope on the table beside me containing printouts of 9 years of bank transfers. I had stopped at the business center in the hotel to print them, wanting physical evidence that could not be dismissed or reinterpreted. My parents arrived first. My mother looking uncharacteristically disheveled, her eyes puffy from either lack of sleep or crying. My father appeared older somehow. His shoulders hunched as if under a physical weight. They slid into the booth across from me, neither quite meeting my eyes. Amy is on her way, my father said, breaking the uncomfortable silence. She had to drop something off first. I nodded, taking a sip of my coffee. Let them sit with the discomfort, I thought. I had carried it for years. Amy arrived 10 minutes later, her expression a mixture of defensiveness and uncertainty. She hesitated before sitting beside our parents, creating a visual divide in the booth, them versus me. It was an apt representation of family dynamics I had felt, but never seen so clearly illustrated. The waitress came by for their orders. Small talk and delaying tactics. When she left, I decided to take control of the conversation that I had been avoiding for 9 years. I have been supporting you financially since Dad lost his job, I said, my voice calm and direct. Monthly transfers to cover the mortgage, utilities, property taxes, insurance, and various emergencies. 9 years of financial support that Mom publicly declared never happened. My mother immediately bristled. You abandoned us. You moved to New York and barely called or visited. Amy was here for us emotionally, which is far more important than money. I did not abandon you. I built a career that enabled me to support you without compromising my independence, I replied. And I never asked for credit or gratitude. But I did not expect to be publicly humiliated and have my contributions not just ignored but explicitly denied. I opened the manila envelope and placed the bank statements on the table, 9 years of evidence arranged in chronological order. Every month for 9 years. Even when I was paying off my student loans. Even when I needed dental surgery and had to finance it because my available funds were going to you. My father reached for the statements, his hands trembling slightly as he reviewed the evidence of my silent support. Cassandra, we did not ask you to do this. No, you did not. I offered because I cared, because despite everything, you are my family. But you accepted every payment without question, maintained a lifestyle you could not afford, and then allowed Mom to tell everyone that I had never lifted a finger while Amy was supposedly supporting you. Amy, who had been uncharacteristically quiet, suddenly looked up from the bank statements. I did support them, she insisted. I called every day. I visited every week. I brought groceries and helped around the house. And that matters, I acknowledged. Emotional support and presence are valuable. But did you ever wonder how they kept the house after Dad lost his job? How they afforded vacations and home renovations on part-time retail work and occasional consulting gigs? A flash of discomfort crossed her face, quickly replaced by defensiveness. They said they were careful with money, that they had savings, and Dad's severance package. The severance package lasted 3 months, my father admitted quietly. The savings were gone within the first year. My mother shot him a look of betrayal. Michael, do not make it sound like we were deceptive. We managed as best we could. With my money, I said firmly, which I freely gave. But the issue is not the financial support itself. It is the narrative you created around it. The story you told the family that Amy was the supportive daughter while I was cold and distant. The toast last night, where you explicitly stated, I never lifted a finger for this family. My mother's face flushed with anger and embarrassment. You have always thought you were better than us with your fancy degree and big city job. Amy actually cares about family. She shows up. She calls. She remembers birthdays and anniversaries. Linda, my father interjected, his voice stronger than I had heard it in years. That is enough. The bank statements are right here. Cassandra has been keeping us afloat for 9 years, while we pretended to everyone, including ourselves, that we were managing on our own. The rare contradiction from my father momentarily silenced my mother. In the pause, I gathered my thoughts. I did not come here for an apology I know I will not receive, I said calmly. I came to inform you of 2 things. First, the monthly transfers will stop effective immediately. You have had 9 years to adjust to Dad's job loss. It is time to make the necessary changes to live within your actual means. You cannot just cut us off, my mother exclaimed, drawing glances from nearby diners. That is cruel and vindictive. It is neither. It is a healthy boundary I should have established years ago. Which brings me to my second point. I am stepping back from this family dynamic. I will no longer participate in a relationship where I am consistently devalued, compared, and manipulated. So you are abandoning us again, Amy said bitterly, running away when things get difficult. No, Amy. I am choosing to invest my emotional and financial resources in relationships that are mutual and respectful. I have spent 32 years trying to earn love that should have been freely given. I am done trying. My father looked genuinely distressed. Cassandra, please. We can work through this. Families have disagreements, but we are still family. Being family should mean more than DNA and obligation, I replied. It should mean honesty, respect, and support that goes both ways. When you and Mom are ready for that kind of relationship, you can contact me. Until then, I need distance. I stood to leave, collecting the bank statements and returning them to the envelope. My mother remained silent, her expression a mixture of anger and calculation that I recognized from childhood confrontations. She was already formulating the narrative she would tell others about this conversation, casting herself as the victim of an ungrateful daughter. What about the house? Amy suddenly asked, the practical implications of my financial withdrawal beginning to dawn on her. What will happen to the house? That will depend on the choices they make, I said. They could downsize to something within their budget. Dad could look for work rather than taking early retirement. Mom could increase her hours at the boutique. There are options that do not involve me subsidizing a lifestyle built on appearances. The reality of their situation was finally registering on their faces. For 9 years, I had been the invisible foundation supporting a house of cards that was about to collapse without my continued input. I have paid enough, I said quietly. Financially and emotionally. It is time for me to stop. As I walked out of the diner into the bright summer day, I felt lighter than I had in years. The confrontation had not brought the emotional closure Hollywood movies might suggest, but it had established a truth and a boundary that would shape whatever came next in our complicated family story. Returning to New York after the reunion debacle felt like emerging from a long tunnel into daylight. My apartment with its carefully chosen furnishings and view of the city I had made, my home represented everything I had built for myself despite the emotional undercurrents that had threatened to pull me under for so many years. The first month after cutting financial ties with my parents was strangely productive. Energy I had not realized was being drained by family dynamics suddenly became available for other aspects of my life. I took on additional projects at work, earning recognition from senior management and positioning myself for the promotion I had been working toward. I joined a rowing club, finding unexpected joy in the early morning hours on the river, the physical exertion clearing my mind in ways therapy alone had not managed. Dr. Hansen noted the change immediately. "You are sitting differently," she observed during our first session after the reunion. "Your shoulders are no longer carrying the weight of your parents' expectations." From a distance, I watched the consequences of my decision unfold through occasional texts from Aunt Patricia and Stephanie, who had become unexpected allies. My parents put their house on the market within weeks, unable to maintain the mortgage payments without my support. They found a smaller townhouse in a less prestigious neighborhood, the physical downsizing a visible symbol of the adjustment forced upon them by financial reality. Amy, confronted with the truth of our parents' situation, had to recalibrate her own role in the family. According to Stephanie, she had moved back in with them temporarily to help with the transition, but was finding the daily reality of their expectations challenging without me as a buffer and financial safety net. For the first time in her adult life, she took a full-time job rather than the part-time positions that had allowed her the freedom she had always enjoyed. My mother attempted contact several times in those first months, her approaches evolving as she tested different strategies to regain control. The initial angry messages accusing me of abandonment gave way to guilt-inducing reminders of all she had sacrificed as a mother. When those failed to elicit a response, she tried acting as if nothing had happened, sending casual texts about neighborhood news or questions about recipes, as if our relationship were normal and undamaged. I maintained my boundary with a simple, consistent message. "I am open to rebuilding our relationship when you are ready to acknowledge the past honestly and commit to mutual respect moving forward." Her responses made it clear that time had not yet arrived. My father reached out separately, his approach is more genuine, if still limited by his lifelong pattern of conflict avoidance. I should have stood up for you, he admitted in an email that arrived 3 months after the reunion. Not just at the toast, but throughout your childhood. I failed you as a father by allowing your mother's favoritism to go unchallenged. It was the most honest communication we had ever shared, and I responded with equal candor, neither absolving him completely nor shutting the door on potential reconciliation. We began a tentative correspondence, careful and measured, but more authentic than our relationship had ever been. As the holidays approached, bringing their inevitable emotional complexities, I made conscious choices about how and with whom I would spend my time. I declined the awkward invitation to Thanksgiving at my parents' new townhouse, opting instead to host a chosen family dinner in my apartment for friends who, like me, had complicated relationships with their biological families. The Christmas season brought more challenging decisions. Aunt Patricia invited me to her home for Christmas Eve, where many extended family members would gather. Your parents will not be there, she assured me. But many of us would love to see you and continue rebuilding those connections. I accepted, finding unexpected joy in reconnecting with relatives who had reached out after learning the truth about my silent support of my parents. Relationships that had been superficial at best were developing new depth based on mutual respect and genuine interest, rather than obligation. 6 months after the reunion incident, I met someone. David was a corporate attorney I encountered at a charity fundraiser, his intelligence and quiet confidence immediately appealing. Our relationship developed with a healthiness that contrasted sharply with my previous romantic attempts, which had always been undermined by my inability to believe I was truly worthy of love. You know what I noticed first about you? He asked one evening as we walked along the Hudson River. How completely yourself you seemed. No performance, no desperate need to impress. Just authenticity. I smiled, recognizing that this quality he admired was relatively new, a hard-won result of the boundaries I had established and the self-worth I was finally claiming. That is a recent development, I admitted, sharing some of my family history. Standing up for yourself is not selfish, he said after listening thoughtfully. It is necessary for any healthy relationship. You cannot truly give to others from an empty well. His understanding validated the difficult choices I had made. For the first time, I was building a relationship without the distorting lens of my family dynamics, coloring my perceptions and reactions. The 6-month mark also brought an unexpected development from Amy. She called one evening, her voice lacking the defensive edge that had characterized our last interaction. I did not know, she said without preamble. About the money, I mean. I really did not know you were supporting them all those years. What did you think was happening? I asked, genuinely curious about her perspective. I thought they were managing on their own, she admitted. Dad occasionally mentioned consulting work. Mom talked about promotions at the boutique. They never seemed worried about money, so I never questioned it. When they mentioned your career success, it was always with this undertone that you were selfish for not sharing it with family. And you believed that I said not as an accusation, but as a statement of fact. It fit the narrative I had always been told, she acknowledged. That I was the good daughter who cared about family, and you were the cold, ambitious one who had left us behind. It was easier to believe that than to question why they could afford things that did not match their visible income. Her honesty was a small breakthrough, though it did not immediately repair the damage between us. Like my father, Amy had been both beneficiary and victim of my mother's manipulative family system, her role as the favored child coming with its own hidden costs that she was only beginning to recognize. I am not the villain in this story, I told her. But neither are you the heroine. We were both assigned roles in a dysfunctional system that served our parents' needs, not ours. I do not know how to be a sister outside of that system, she confessed. We have never had a relationship that was not defined by competition and comparison. Maybe we start by being honest, I suggested, and by not letting Mom triangulate us against each other anymore. It was a tentative beginning, the first shoot of a potentially healthier sibling relationship emerging from the scorched earth of our family dynamics. Whether it would flourish remained to be seen, but the possibility existed where none had before. As winter turned to spring, I continued building my life on new foundations. The promotion at work came through, bringing increased responsibility and compensation. David and I moved from dating to a committed relationship. My chosen family of friends expanded and deepened, and I continued the inner work of recognizing and releasing the patterns that no longer served me. The most profound change I see, Dr. Hansen noted as we approached a year of therapy, is that you no longer measure your worth by your parents' approval. You have internalized your own value independent of their ability to recognize it. It was true. The desperate need for validation that had driven so many of my choices, including the 9 years of financial support, had finally begun to loosen its grip. I was learning to parent myself in the ways my actual parents never had, providing the unconditional love and acceptance that had been so painfully absent in my childhood. The journey was far from complete, but for the first time I was moving forward rather than circling the same painful patterns, hoping for different results. I was building a life based not on the absence of pain, but on the presence of joy, connection, and authenticity. It was imperfect and sometimes messy, but it was genuinely mine. 1 year after my mother stood up at the family reunion and declared that I had never lifted a finger for them, I stood in my New York apartment looking out at the city lights, reflecting on how profoundly my life had changed. The anniversary had not escaped my notice, but it no longer carried the emotional charge it once would have. It was simply a marker on a journey that continued to unfold in unexpected ways. The year had brought growth in nearly every area of my life. Professionally, I had settled into my new role as Director of Financial Analysis, leading a team of 6 analysts with a management style deliberately different from the criticism-heavy approach I had grown up with. I celebrated their successes, genuinely provided constructive feedback without comparisons, and created an environment where innovation was encouraged rather than punished. My relationship with David had deepened into something I had never experienced before, a partnership of equals based on mutual respect and genuine affection, rather than need or obligation. He had recently moved in our shared space, becoming a home in the truest sense of the word, filled with laughter, occasional disagreements resolved through honest communication, and a day-to-day comfort I had never known was possible. My connections with extended family had evolved in ways I could not have predicted. Aunt Patricia had become something of a surrogate mother figure, our regular phone calls and occasional visits building a relationship based on genuine interest rather than obligation. Cousin Stephanie and I had grown closer, our shared experience at the reunion, creating a bond that extended beyond our childhood connection. Even great-uncle Walter had reached out in his own way, sending newspaper clippings about financial news with notes saying, "Thought you might find this interesting." The most complex changes involved my immediate family. My father and I had established a cautious new relationship through regular email exchanges and occasional phone calls. He had found part-time work as a business consultant, rediscovering professional satisfaction while contributing to the household income in a meaningful way for the first time in years. Our conversations remained mostly surface level, but moments of genuine connection occasionally broke through the habitual distance. "I am proud of you, Cassandra," he said during one phone call, the words I had longed to hear throughout my childhood finally arriving in my 30s. "Not just for your professional success, but for having the courage to break patterns I never could." My mother remained the most resistant to change, unable or unwilling to acknowledge her role in the family dysfunction. She had constructed a new narrative about the events of the previous year, casting herself as the victim of a misunderstanding blown out of proportion. According to Aunt Patricia, she told relatives that I had overreacted to a harmless toast and was punishing the entire family over a simple misunderstanding. I maintained minimal contact with her, brief phone calls on holidays and birthdays that remained carefully within the boundaries I had established. She continued to test those boundaries, making occasional comments designed to provoke guilt or obligation, but I had developed the ability to recognize these attempts without being drawn into old patterns. "Your healing does not depend on her acknowledgement," Dr. Hansen reminded me during one of our now monthly sessions. "That would be convenient, but true healing comes from within, from recognizing your own worth regardless of whether she ever validates it." Amy and I were building a relationship independent of our parents for the first time in our lives. It was awkward and uncertain, both of us learning to relate as adults, without the comparative framework that had defined our childhood interactions. We had begun meeting for lunch every few months when her work brought her to New York, carefully navigating toward a potential friendship that might someday feel like genuine sisterhood. The financial consequences of ending my support had forced necessary changes in my parents' lifestyle. They had adjusted to their smaller home, reduced their discretionary spending, and faced the reality of their actual income level rather than the inflated lifestyle my contributions had maintained. According to Amy, there had been difficult moments of adjustment, but ultimately the honesty was healthier than the pretense they had maintained for so many years. As for me, I had redirected the money previously sent to my parents toward investments in my own future and causes I believed in. I established a scholarship fund at my alma mater, specifically designed for students who, like me, were the first in their families to attend college. I increased my retirement savings, securing my own financial independence. And I allowed myself small luxuries that I had previously denied, recognizing that self-care was not selfishness but necessary maintenance. The most profound change, however, was internal. I had finally released the desperate need for parental approval that had driven so many of my choices. I understood now that no amount of financial support could purchase the unconditional love I had craved, that validation coming from external sources would always be conditional and therefore insufficient. Money cannot buy love, I told the small gathering of friends, celebrating my birthday in my apartment. I spent 9 years and thousands of dollars learning that lesson the hard way. David squeezed my hand, understanding the journey behind the simple statement. My friends who had heard versions of my story over the year nodded in recognition of this hard-won wisdom. As my birthday celebration wound down and guests began to leave, I checked my email and found an invitation from Aunt Patricia to the upcoming family reunion. "Many of us would love to see you there," she wrote. "But everyone understands if you are not ready. Family healing happens on its own timeline." I closed the email without responding immediately, knowing I had time to consider what felt right for me rather than what obligation might dictate. The invitation itself represented progress, acknowledging my agency in choosing whether to attend rather than assuming my presence was required by family duty. Later that night, as David and I cleaned up the remains of the party, he asked, "Will you go to the reunion?" I considered the question carefully. I do not know yet. Part of me wants to see the family members who have been supportive. Another part wonders if it is too soon, if the old dynamics would be too easily triggered. "Whatever you decide," he said, "you will be making the choice from strength, not fear. That is what matters." He was right. The decision itself was less important than the fact that it would be made consciously, based on what was healthy for me rather than what others expected. That freedom to choose based on my own well-being rather than others' approval was perhaps the greatest gift of the difficult year behind me. As I fell asleep that night, I reflected on the strange journey that had brought me to this point. My mother's public declaration that I had never lifted a finger for them had been painful beyond measure in the moment. But it had also been the catalyst for necessary change, forcing into the open truths that had festered in silence for too long. The truth, once acknowledged, had set in motion a series of revelations and adjustments that ultimately benefited everyone involved, even those who had initially resisted it most strongly. My parents were living more authentically within their means. Amy was developing independence and perspective she had never needed before. The extended family had glimpsed the reality beneath the carefully maintained surface of our dynamics. And I had finally freed myself from patterns of seeking approval that could never be genuinely given. Life would continue to present challenges, relationships would evolve in ways I could not predict, and the work of maintaining healthy boundaries would never truly be complete. But I had learned that worth comes from within, that truth eventually finds its way to the surface, and that authentic connections built on honesty and mutual respect are the only foundation strong enough to support a truly fulfilling life. So, have you ever had a family member undervalue your contributions? Have you struggled with setting boundaries with toxic relatives? Please share your experiences in the comments below. I would love to hear how you navigated similar situations in your own life. And if this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who might need to hear that they are not alone in their family struggles. Thank you for listening to my journey, and remember that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is to love yourself enough to walk away.